What's up, guys? We are back. It's a great Sunday morning, and I love getting to be with you this Sunday morning. I hope you're as amped as I am to jump back in, to get back into the Word, to study the Word along with me. So, what I want you to do this morning is take a moment, stop, pray along with me. Father, I pray that you would allow us to have the minds and the hearts, the souls to be focused on you for these next 20-ish minutes, Lord, and that you would teach us by your Spirit, and that you'd give us understanding and knowledge, Father. And if any one of us right now don't know you as their Lord and Savior, that this is the time that we'd recognize our desperate need, that we're sinners in need of you, and you sent your Son Jesus for us. Lord, we love you and we need you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So grab a Bible, grab a pen, grab some coffee, your favorite drink, whatever that is, maybe some water, some milk. Jump in with me as we are going to be in Acts. Last week we had 3 big points, if you remember. It was this: reflect Jesus. That was point number 2. Number 1 was live godly lives. Number 2, reflect Jesus. And number 3 is to be useful. So remember, live godly lives, reflect Jesus, be useful. That's what we were talking about last week. This week we're jumping in all the way to the book of Acts. We're going to open up, we're going to look at, it's in chapter 3. Chapter 3 was where we were. And as we're looking at this week we're going to be in chapters 4 and 5. And so, flip there, get ready to jump in with me. We're going to have a great time this morning. So I was on a plane flight back in 2008 or so, and I was watching this film. You know how plane flights are. They have films from previous years, and you get to screen them. And the film was Bucket List. I'd heard a lot about it. Morgan Freeman was in it. Jack Nicholson was in it. I had no idea what it was about, but I was bored, so I just clicked it to watch it. And it's a very fascinating story about a healthcare tycoon who's a billionaire, and then just this plain dude, and they both end up getting lung cancer. And the healthcare tycoon is only ever really worried about money and making money, and this other guy has actually created a bucket list, like things that he wanted to do before he passed away. And it was so interesting to see their lives and how they live and what they live for. And because of the intersection of them at that time, they actually ended up doing all of these bucket list items together. And by watching that, it was just so interesting. It was very introspective for our own lives as well, to think, how do I live? How do I live? And what does it look like to live? Today in Acts chapter 4, we're going to see the entire group of believers and how they were living at the time. And not all of them were living great lives. There's some, specifically 2 people, a husband and wife, named Ananias and Sapphira, who were living really wrong. So 3 things that I want us to get out of today is this. This is how we should be living. 1, we need to live in great grace. Point number 2, we need to live generously. And point number 3, we need to live without self. So jump in with me, Acts chapter 4. We're going to begin in verse 32. We're going to read through verse 35 for our first point, our first focus, which is this. If you're taking notes, write it down. Live in great grace. Live in great grace. Now, the entire group of those who believed were of one heart and mind. And no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. With great power, the apostles were giving testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And great grace was on all of them. For there was not a needy person among them, because all those who owned lands or houses sold them, brought the proceeds of what was sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet. This was then distributed to each person as any had need. Live in great grace. Verse 33 hits it home. The apostles are preaching, they're teaching. So the apostles, these are the guys being the disciples. And you know, Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus, died. He committed suicide, and they replaced him. And so these are the apostles, these 12 guys, these apostles. They're teaching with great boldness. They're teaching truth. Everybody hearing them was recognizing, was hearing that they were in desperate need of Jesus as their Savior, because they couldn't do enough to get to heaven, no matter what. They were never going to be good enough to get to heaven. One sin separates them from God Himself, and they need Jesus. You and I need Jesus to save us. And then we see in verse 33, it goes on, and great grace was on all of them. Man, grace. Getting something we do not deserve. And that's the beauty of Jesus. That's the beauty of salvation. We must live in great grace. We must live in that recognition of who Jesus is, what He's done in our lives, and what He's doing today, and just the joy and the grace He's providing us on a daily basis. Think through John 3:16. Everybody knows this verse. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish but have eternal life. Man, when we think through that and we recognize the beauty of who Jesus is, His great grace in coming down for you and me, from leaving God the Father to walk this earth as a man in flesh and as God as well, the God-man, fully God, fully man. For you and me, what great grace. We didn't deserve that. The world didn't deserve that. We didn't even deserve to have Jesus walking among us. And yet He takes it a step further, and because of His great love for us, He died on the cross for our sins, that He was buried, and that He was raised on the third day so that I could have a relationship with Him and be saved. Remember Ephesians 2, verses 4 and 5. But God, who is rich in mercy, because of His great love that He had for us, made us alive with Christ, even though we were dead in trespasses. You are saved by grace. And we are saved by grace. And what we see right here is that not only are we saved by grace, which is the most, but we're called to continue to live in that grace. In that great grace of Jesus. Not taking for granted our salvation, not taking for granted the grace that He continually bestows upon you and me. I was out walking this morning with baby Tate and Burton, and there's like this little trail that runs behind our house along the road, and it's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the ways that the Lord provides a great grace to me in a very real, present way of getting to hold sweet Tate in my arms. And he's getting heavy, but I still hold him, and I walk Burton at the same time every morning so that Burton can go out and use the bathroom. And Tate loves Burton, so he gets to see it. But the great grace is, man, the great grace that I get to think upon in just getting to hold my little boy is the responsibility that the Lord's called me to as a dad, but also just Him giving Kimberly and myself Tate as a little baby, and that great grace and that opportunity. It's not something that I'm living in and recognizing and wanting to continue to recognize. So this week, as you're going through your week, take the times, stop, and write down these moments of the great grace God is providing you still. These little moments of things you don't deserve, but you are getting and you are reaping. And that grace that you're getting to live in. Secondly, we get told to live generously. Live generously. Verse 36, Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus by birth, the one the apostles called Barnabas, which is translated son of encouragement. What a great name, son of encouragement. Sold a field he owned, brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet. That's what we were told they were doing already in verse 34 and 35. And we get a specific example of what that looks like in verses 36 and 37. Read on with me, chapter 5, verse 1. But a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. However, he kept back part of the proceeds with his wife's knowledge and brought a portion of it and laid it to the apostles' feet. Notice here, we get shown two ways to live. One is living generously. One is living very, very selfishly. And what I want us to pick up here is focus on the dude named Joseph, the one that all the apostles called Barnabas. Notice what he does. We get told that he lives generously. Lives generously. For you and me, we think back to Ephesians. We think back to chapter 5 and verse 1. And it says, therefore, be imitators of God as dearly loved children, just as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. Therefore, be imitators of God as dearly loved children, just as Christ loved us and gave himself for us as a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. Verse 2 goes on to say that we should walk in love. That we should walk in love. Therefore, be imitators of God as dearly loved children. And walk in love as Christ also loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. Live generously. There is no greater generosity for you and me, for you and I to stop, for you and I to sit and think upon than this, the cross of Jesus Christ. There is no greater generosity. There is no greater grace. There is no greater gift that we need to stop on a daily basis and say, remind ourselves of the gospel. Remind ourselves of what Jesus has done for you and me. When you do that, it's going to get you out of bed. It's going to give you a vigor to attack your day. Knowing and resting in the grace and the generosity of our great God and how much we are loved by him. If you have your Bible, you can flip over with me to Philippians chapter 2. There's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians. So Paul's writing to the people in Philippi here, and he says this, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility considers others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Live generously. I'm not just talking about you just throwing money out there. I'm not just talking about you buying stuff for people. I'm talking about you living generously with your time and really with your affections and your cares for people. For people. And your money is important, and we are called as believers to tithe to the church. We're called to faithfully and generously give, at the very least, 10% of what we make to the church. But I'm not only talking about that discipline of tithing and recognizing that everything that we have is the Lord's. I'm talking about even being generous, going above and beyond that. Not just in money, but in your time and in your efforts, everything, and how you look upon people. This week, not only write down how the Lord's showing you great grace, write down how are you actually living generously. Are you living generously? Or, as in point 3, Don't live this way, but live without self. Keep reading with me about Ananias and Sapphira. Fascinating story here. Ananias, Peter asked in verse 3, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the proceeds of the land? Wasn't it yours while you possessed it? And after it was sold, wasn't it at your disposal? Why is it that you plan this thing in your heart? You have not lied to people, but to God. When he heard these words, Ananias dropped dead, and a great fear came on all who heard. The young men got up, wrapped his body, carried him out, and buried him. Verse 7. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Tell me, Peter asked her, did you sell the land for this price? Yes, she said, for that price. Then Peter said to her, why did you agree to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Instantly she dropped dead at his feet. When the young men came in, they found her dead, carried her out, and buried her beside her husband. Then great fear came on all the church and on all who heard these things. Live without self. Notice Ananias and Sapphira. Notice what they were doing. One, as Peter says, they were testing the Lord and his Spirit. They're trying to deceive God himself. But two, they're being crazily selfish. For them, it's I'm not even convinced reading the scripture it's about the money they're holding back, in a sense. It's actually more about the prestige they're wanting to get. That's what Peter says. Man, you sold the piece of property. It was yours to do with whatever you want. The money, when you got the property, still whatever yours to do with what you want. And then you come up here and you say, boom, here's all this. We sold this piece of property. This is what we got for it. And yet, testing the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of the Lord within him, Peter knew that that was not true. Ananias and Sapphira is one of the most brutal cases of selfishness that we find in Scripture. It was all about them. It was all about making them look as good as they could and still getting away with something. And it's in direct opposition that we find this story with Barnabas. The man named Joseph, the Levite from Cyprus, who, instead of living selfishly, living all about himself, was all in on living for the Lord and living generously. He was willing to sell a piece of property that he owned and give everything to the community of believers, whereas Ananias and Sapphira are willing to sell a piece of property only to get prestige and honor amongst the church and still even keep a little bit of money for themselves. So not only are they selfish, there's still a little bit of greed there too. I'm not sitting here saying, though, that if you're going to live selfishly or anything, that you're going to drop dead tomorrow. Don't hear that. But what we are seeing here, what we saw in Philippians chapter 2, 3, and 4 that call us out is this. Not only are we to live generously, but if we're to live generously, then we have to live without self. That for you and me, our lives are much greater than just about us. Much greater than just about us. What are you living for? Who are you living for? Can you say, Andrew, I really am living for Jesus? Or would you say, man, I'm really living for myself most days? That film that I talked about at the very beginning, The Bucket List. The Jack Nicholson character is this hospital tycoon. And his entire life is not revolving around family. It's not revolving around anything other than this. It's revolving around himself and being as selfish and greedy as he can be. He wants to make all the money. He wants to do all the things, not to help people, but to help his prestige and himself. Are we living more like that, or are we willing to say that, man, my life and my desire is to live for Jesus, and I want to live generously? So this week, think about it. How are you living in great grace? Write down those moments when the Lord is providing you those great grace opportunities and gifts. Are you living generously? Point number 2. Or are you living selfishly? Don't live that way. Instead, in point 3, live without self. Make the life your life as I'm working to make my life to be an imitator of God and to walk in his love. I love you guys. We'll see you later.